It's good to be here. I was talking with Aaron about that reversal of 3 girls and then a boy is what I had. Our boy was a bit of a surprise. He's 5 years younger than his sisters. And what I've learned with my son, but more than my son, what I've learned because of my daughters, they're all into music theater. People who are into music theater are different than people who are into sports, generally speaking. I'm a lot more comfortable amongst the athletes. Not that I am one, I just am more comfortable among the athletes. But before I get started, I didn't know where to go tonight. I eventually want to get to a question and answer because most of the people, when they hear that I'm the chaplain for the Dodgers, want to ask questions and want to talk about that, and I'm glad to do that. I love talking about that and answering those questions, but before I do, I wanted to give you something. And before I get to that, I just wanted to give you my own background, my own story, how I ended up doing what I'm doing. And it began, I loved baseball. Baseball was my first love. It's what I wanted to do. I wanted to play professional baseball as a kid. I was a huge Dodger fan growing up, grew up in Orange County. And that was my life's dream. And then when I was in high school, I wrestled and played baseball my first 2 years. My third year as a wrestler, this is how big I was. I wrestled 98 pounds. That was the weight class when I was a freshman in high school in 1986, I think. And I didn't have to cut weight. I wrestled at 98 pounds and never had to worry about what I ate. My sophomore year, I wrestled at 105, sometimes 112s, but mostly at 105s. My junior year, I wrestled at 119s, and I tore my rotator cuff. And that was the end of my baseball career. But at that time, I was starting to play golf. And I got a lot better at golf, a lot quicker than I probably ever would have got in baseball, and I ended up getting a golf scholarship to Long Beach State University, played there, lettered for 4 years, and really enjoyed my time there, wanted to be a professional golfer. Are you getting a theme here? My goal in life was to play professional sports, and I had a lot better chance at it in golf than I ever would have at baseball. And my junior year, God got a hold of me. I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up with solid Christian parents. My dad took very seriously the charge to disciple his children. My brother and I had to memorize Bible verses every week, and it wasn't because we were being asked to at church. It was because my dad was testing us every week, and he was learning the same Bible verses along with us. But as some of you know, and especially some of you who are now students at Biola know, there comes a point where you have to own your faith, that your parents don't, as much as you want them to pass on their faith, and hopefully they will, there's a time where you have to make that decision yourself, that you're going to follow Christ. And that was what happened to me as a junior in college. I was dating a gal who was Catholic. Her family was Catholic, and they were very Catholic. And so every time we got together, one of her brothers, who was older than us, would grill me about how the Catholic Church was the true church. And it forced me to, I didn't think the Catholic Church was the real church, or the true church in the sense of like the way they did things, but I couldn't defend why I believed what I believed. And so it forced me to go to God's Word and to figure out, well, why do I believe what I believe? And it was in studying and having to defend my faith with Him that's when God's Word came alive. That's when I became a believer. And the way that I tell the story is I used to go to church thinking about golf, and it flip-flopped. I started playing golf thinking about church. And by the time I was a senior in college, I knew that God had been calling me to vocational ministry. That's a story for another day, but it was confirmed by some men that I respected. And I graduated from Long Beach State and immediately enrolled in Talbot, summer school Greek. They called it Greek Madness back then when I was doing it. And just loved every minute of it. I was at Long Beach State University. Now this is something that you guys take for granted. But I had never in my life been in a classroom where a teacher led us in prayer. Think about that. I went through public schools my whole life, then went to Long Beach State University, far from a Christian institution. And I walked into summer school Greek that first morning, sat down, and the professor said, "Let's bow our heads in prayer." And I literally almost fell out of my chair. I was like, "Really? You can pray in class? That's okay?" I didn't know. And that was when everything came alive to me. Academics came alive to me. I was not a great student in college. Get into that a little bit later. But I had all these things that were just coming alive to me, and Biola was responsible for that. The professors that I had at Biola, the people that I met at Biola, that all came alive to me. I pastor now at a church with 2 of my professors from Talbot School of Theology. Dr. Joe Hellerman and Dr. John Hutchison are two of my closest friends. They're mentors, but we've been pastoring together now for a lot of years. And so I am so grateful and so thankful for Biola University and the impact it's had in my life. And I'm jealous in a non-sinful way of the opportunity that you guys have to play a sport at a Christian university. It's unbelievable. And so as I thought about that, that's where I wanted to go tonight. I wanted to give you guys a charge that you're at a Christian university and you need to take advantage of that because you don't realize, and some of you will never realize. Hopefully most of you will realize what a blessing that is, and the sooner you realize that, the better that's going to be for you and for those you love. So if you look at the title slide that I have right there, Suffering Fools Endlessly, My Work with Professional Athletes. Now, I'm going to explain that title in a second. But just to give you an idea of my work with professional athletes, our church was planted in Manhattan Beach. We bought a warehouse in El Segundo, which is just literally across the street. And we happened to buy a warehouse that's about a half a mile away from where the Los Angeles Kings and the Los Angeles Lakers built their practice facility at the Toyota Center. So one of the trainers for the Kings started coming to our church, and it was through that relationship that he asked me if I would be willing to disciple a new believer on the Kings. And I said, absolutely, would love to. That grew into a little Bible study with some of the Kings players. And as I'm saying this out loud, I'm thinking to myself, they've won 2 Stanley Cups since I started working with the Kings. And then there's another connection. Clayton Kershaw has won 3 Cy Young Awards since I've been the chaplain for the Dodgers. So Biola baseball players, I'm just saying, if you want some mojo, come, But then what happens? You begin working with some of the Kings, and there's the biggest issue in relationships with professional athletes, quite frankly, is just trust. And when you begin to, it's like you get your foot in that door, and you now have some trusting relationships with these guys, and that opens doors with other guys. And so that was how I began working with some of the Lakers, and then eventually with the Dodgers. And the Dodgers most intensely, the Dodgers are most welcoming to me. And what I mean by that is the Kings never, they would allow me in the locker room if I was going very specifically to talk to a player or a coach. But I never had open access. With the Dodgers, it's like I'm one of the guys. I can go out there anytime. I do go out there a lot. I hang out there with the players to build those relationships. Of the 10 coaches who are paid full-time coaches on the Dodgers staff, 8 of them are regular chapel attenders. And so that sort of access really gives me opportunity with those players. This offseason, I got an email from the new one of the new front office people who they had signed somebody who was having some issues. And so I didn't know how the new front office was going to be. And he emailed me and put me in touch with the player's agent because he wanted me to talk to this new player. And so I'm very grateful for the favor that God has given me with the Dodgers and with the opportunity to speak to those players. I liken it to a poker hand. You don't get to pick your cards, but you get to play the hand you're dealt. And with the Dodgers, I've been dealt a very good hand. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about tonight. But anyway, this Suffering Fools Endlessly, where does that come from? How many of you have heard of Rick Riley? Anybody heard of Rick Riley, the sports writer? When I was a kid growing up, we didn't have the internet. And every week, Sports Illustrated would come in the mail. And that was as soon as that was in the mail at our house, I would turn to the back page, and the back inside cover was an article or a column by Rick Riley. I love this guy. He was 11-time National Sports Writer of the Year. He just finished his last column last year with ESPN.com, and now he does other features for ESPN, but he's done writing his weekly column. And in one of his last columns, this is what he wrote. This is one of the quotes from there. It says, "I would rather cover athletes than any other anything. They show up early, they are accountable, they suffer fools endlessly, and punch a very small percentage of them. They're forced to explain themselves daily and yet do it without bile. They push themselves places you don't know exist. Exhausted, they perform feats under pressure that never fail to give me chicken skin." That's been my experience. What other profession does somebody have to, after pitching and giving up 7 runs in 1 inning in a playoff game, have to stand in front of his locker and meet with 50 or 60 media members and answer questions about how much he sucked tonight. None of us have to do that. Monday mornings, I don't get up and have a crowd of reporters outside my office asking how I preached the day before. But if you're an athlete, that's your daily life. And athletes do it on a daily basis. And so in one sense, I think athletes get a really bad rap. They are more accountable than I think any other segment of our population as far as their performance goes. And that's fun for me. I love being around that sort of excellence. I love being around guys that are accountable for their actions. And we don't get that story a lot in the media. We get, in fact, just the opposite, that these guys are unaccountable, they're making so much money. Quite frankly, they are way overpaid. But as it goes, as a culture and as a society, most of them are more accountable for the money they're making than a lot of other segments of our culture. And I enjoy that. That's fun to be around that. So here are some lessons that I've learned working with these professional athletes that I want to give to you tonight, and then we'll do a question and answer. The first thing that I want you to pay attention to, this is specifically to you baseball players. You will one day, very soon, be a former baseball player. Every single person in here, every single person in that picture right there, this is just a chapel photo from 2012. So that was my second year, I think, as a second or third year as a chaplain. And if you just look starting at the left, that first guy there in that picture is a pitcher by the name of Ted Lilly. Ted Lilly is no longer in baseball. Ted Lilly's nice and retired, enjoying the retired life in Central California, but he's no longer a baseball player. The guy next to him is Fumi. Fumi was a bullpen catcher, and Fumi is no longer with the Dodgers. He's now trying to make it back up through the minor leagues. Below him is a guy by the name of Tony Gwynn Jr. Tony Gwynn Jr. he played with the Phillies last year, but he's currently unsigned with anybody. It looks like Tony's career is over. Next to Tony Gwynn is a guy by the name of Juan Rivera. Juan Rivera had a long, really solid major league career. Juan is no longer playing professional baseball. Above there is Mark Ellis, played second base for the Dodgers, played with the Cardinals last year. Mark is currently unsigned. It looks like his career is over. This is 2 years ago, 2012. One day I'm going to be able to go through every single player, including Clayton Kershaw, including Matt Kemp, including all those guys, and say not one of them is a baseball player anymore. The sooner you realize that your identity is not as a baseball player, that that's not primarily who you are, it's what you do right now, the healthier the rest of your life is going to be. I went through this as a golfer. For my college years, this is Brandon. He's captain of the golf team at Long Beach State. My parents introduced me that way. This is my son Brandon. He's captain of the team at Long Beach State. That was my identity, and I didn't realize how much it was my identity until halfway through my senior year when I realized that I was going to go to Talbot, and I had to start telling people that. Because no longer was I Brandon who was going to be a professional golfer, I was Brandon who was going to be a pastor. And I don't know how you feel about that, but at that time, as a senior in college, there's a little disparity between those two things. And so the first thing I want you guys to know tonight is that baseball will end. There will come a day where you will no longer be a baseball player. For some of you, that could be tomorrow. Career-ending injury, you're done. For some of you, it could be at the end of your 4 years of eligibility at Biola. Some of you may even go on and play pro ball somewhere. But eventually it'll come to an end. Realize that and understand that it's what you do, it's not who you are. You're going to get that message more loudly and more clearly at Biola University than you probably will at any other university in America. Thank God for where you're at. Take advantage of it. The second thing there, as athletes, as baseball players, God has given you a platform. Use it for His glory. This is a picture of Faith Day at Dodger Stadium this year in 2014. That's A.J. Ellis is the catcher. We'll see if he's the starter this year. He's got some competition now. Scott Van Slyke is sitting next to him. Then Adrian Gonzalez and Clayton Kershaw. 3 years ago, we started Faith Day at Dodger Stadium. The first year we had a little over 1,000 people, maybe 1,200 people stuck around. The Dodgers gave us absolutely zero publicity. Didn't even announce it during that game. So it was one of those, like, they just had to show up after the game and we'll hope they would come out, people would come out. What had happened is one of the radio stations, I think maybe KKLA, one of the Christian stations had announced, and they had a booth that people could go get a wristband from them, and that would allow them to stay after the game. And so again, we had maybe 1,200 people there. Then 2 years ago, we had another Faith Day, and we had about 3,500 people stick around for it. And before this season, if you look at that, Clayton Kershaw and Adrian Gonzalez are two pretty good players. They have a lot of clout with the organization. They use that clout. And before this season, they went upstairs, and this is what they said. Hey, we don't care that you had the first gay and lesbian LGBT Pride Night at Dodger Stadium. That's great. But could you at least give us the same love? Could you at least give us that same opportunity for a faith night? And the Dodgers, to their credit, said, you're absolutely right. We haven't given you the same sort of love that we gave them. Sure. And the Dodgers got a little bit more behind it this year, and we had 8,000 people stick around this year after the game, and we're hoping that next year it will just continue to grow. But my point with this picture is those guys used their influence. They used the credibility they had for God's glory. They were unashamed in their proclamation that, hey, we want the opportunity to proclaim this faith. And they're using the platform that God has given them as athletes. As college athletes, you guys will have a platform, not just now while you're in school here on this campus, but even when you graduate. There's just a cool factor to being a college athlete. Use that cool factor for the glory of God. These guys do it not just on Faith Day, but daily. Here's a couple other pictures. This next picture is from a trip that we took to the Dominican Republic. So in November, I went with Clayton, AJ Ellis, and one of the coaches, Brandon McDaniel. He's the strength and conditioning coach, and that's me. I'm usually standing outside the pictures because I'm not great. I don't know if you guys knew this, but baseball is kind of big in the Dominican Republic. It's a hotbed for baseball. So you get Clayton Kershaw and AJ Ellis out there doing drills. What do the players want to do? What do they want to do in front of Clayton Kershaw? Impress him. Thank you. There's a reason you're the most popular kid on campus, huh? They want to impress him. And so Clayton tells me, he goes, hey, Brandon, go cover third. We're going to do drills at third and at first. I'm okay, eye hand coordination, but these are 15 and 16-year-old Dominican kids who want to throw it as hard as they absolutely can in front of Clayton Kershaw. And so literally, it was just the grace of God, I'm telling you. The first kid comes off the mound for this little comebacker drill, and he picks it up left-handed, turns around, throws it as hard as he possibly can, and by the time I lifted my glove up, it buzzed by me. And Clayton looked at me with big eyes, and he's like, dude, are you sure you're ready for this? I'm like, yeah, just give me another opportunity, give me another chance. I'm good, I can do this. So we did this drill, and then what we would do is after the clinic that these guys would put on, then they would gather up, huddle up, and these guys would give their testimony, talk to them about Jesus. Now, here's what I mean by using your platform. This is a picture from another angle, just by way of blessing. You guys see where they're sitting? You see how rocky that is down there? That's right field. And the infield is about that bad. It's unbelievable the fields that these kids play on daily. So be grateful for what we have in America, the opportunity we have. But if you look at this kid right there, bottom left of the picture, he looks actually a little bigger on the TV screen. It adds like 15 pounds, I think. But he is really thin kid. A lot of these kids didn't have a glove. And so what they would do is they would do the drills. As they were getting to the front of the line, they'd grab a glove, do their drill, and then give the glove back and go to the back of the line. So this kid right there in the green shorts and the blue hat, the skinniest kid out there, and one of the smallest kids, but he hustled everywhere. He was just awesome with his attitude, his smile. He was just engaged in the whole system. And I just thought to myself, like, that kid, man, I just wish we could bless that kid. Somehow we could do something for that kid. But the way the day went, and then right after this, a lot of crowds, word gets out that Clayton Kershaw's at the field, and so people from the village are coming out, and then security had to kind of get us out of there. But right before we leave, Clayton seeks out that kid right there and hands him his glove. In front of everybody, Clayton Kershaw gave his glove to this kid. To this day, we're worried that the kid made it home. We don't know. But the point was, Clayton noticed that kid. He didn't have to do that, but he did. And you imagine how much more weight Clayton Kershaw's testimony has in the eyes of that kid because of what he did at the end of that day's practice. And it wasn't just that kid that noticed. What happened when more people started coming out is I assume it was one of the parents of one of the kids there, because it was an older gentleman. And this is what he said. He looked at AJ and Clayton up there and he goes, why are you guys different? Why are you guys different than the other Dominican MLB guys who have come and done clinics for us? There's something different about you. And he didn't use the word humble, but that's the word he was searching for. That what these people noticed was a humility in Clayton and AJ, these major league players. One of them was the MVP and the Cy Young winner this year. And he noticed the humility that they had. Using your platform is not just proclaiming Christ on Faith Day, it's the way you treat people on a daily basis. People notice and they see the humility with which you live life. And as they see that, you're going to have influence and you're going to have impact. So use that platform. Then this next picture here. This was one of the funnest parts of my job, is getting to celebrate after either clinching a playoff spot or winning a series. This was after clinching the National League West. And if you look at that picture, I'm standing next to Chad Billingsley, Chris Withrow's next to him, Josh Beckett is in the middle, then AJ and Clayton. And the reason I put this slide up here is, here's the next lesson. People will surprise you. For the rest of your life, some of you adults in the room who are older, parents in the room, you know that people will surprise you. Some for the better, some for the worse. Josh Beckett surprised me for the better. Josh Beckett is a World Series winner. I think he might have been World Series MVP when the Florida Marlins won the World Series. He also won a World Series with the Boston Red Sox. And if you follow sports or watch SportsCenter at all, then you know that Josh Beckett had a horrible reputation. And he had a horrible reputation because of the way he interacted with the media while he was in Boston specifically. And so when the Dodgers traded for Josh Beckett, I was like my preconceived notion of what Josh Beckett was going to be like was, this is a guy that I probably want to stay away from. And he surprised me for the better. One of the nicest guys in baseball. And then you hear the real stories of why there was antagonism with the Boston media, and you kind of get the fuller picture and the fuller story of what's going on. But Josh is always a reminder to me that people are surprising. And a lot of people are going to be surprising for the good, and then other people are going to be surprising for the bad. There's other players who I've met that I'm not going to mention by name who are pretty quick to give God credit on TV during an interview. But you see the way they live their life and you interact with them and you see the way they treat people and you realize, I wish that guy wouldn't proclaim Christ because he's doing more damage to the name of Christ than he is good for the name of Christ. And here's my charge to you guys. Be a pleasant surprise to everybody who has a preconceived idea of what athletes are like. That you guys have the opportunity to go out there and to be the sort of surprise that people say, wow, I didn't know baseball players were like that. Because I don't know how it is now, I'm just going to be real with you for a second. But when I was at Talbot, 95 to 98, 96, 97, 98, baseball players at Biola didn't have the best reputation among the undergrads. And again, I don't know what that's like now. I didn't really know the program back then or anything. But listening to Coach Jay talk, listening to Trevor and Ryan talk about the players and what they want to do with you, you guys have every opportunity in the world to be a pleasant surprise to the people around here. Not just on campus, but way beyond what you guys do here for the next 4 years. So those are some lessons that I want to leave you with. And here, if I could tell you one way to do that, here's the key to it all. Let's get that next slide up there. In the Old Testament, if I were to say, who are the celebrities in the Old Testament? We could talk about individuals, but let me talk about a couple of offices that I think are the celebrities of the Old Testament. One of the celebrities in the Old Testament would be the office of high priest, right? I mean, think about the high priest. He gets to walk out. Everybody else is wearing like just white tunics, maybe off-white tunics, dirty. And he gets to walk around in something that puts the Pope to shame. And I mean, he's just the man. And everybody would look at this guy, and he was, not only was he the man because of how he looked, but he's the man because he gets to represent the people to God. Like he's the go-between between the people and God. He's the guy. Now, if you remember in the Old Testament, one of the high priests was a fellow by the name of Eli. You guys familiar with the story? Come on now, Biola students, 30 units of Bible. At some point, you're going to have to read 1 Samuel. Eli is one of the high priests. Eli has two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Not the best guys. These were guys who used their celebrity, who used the influence that God had given the office of high priest to take advantage of women. They were sleeping with people they didn't have the temple at the time, but at the tabernacle, at the place of worship. They were not who you would think. They were taking money from the offerings. When people brought their sacrifices and wanted to offer the best of the meat to God, and then the priests were supposed to get the leftovers, they took what they wanted first and then gave God the leftovers. Everything the opposite. And this is how the whole passage, setting the stage for God's judgment that's going to come down on Eli's family and those two sons, those priests of Israel. The next slide, this is what the verse says. It says, "Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord." That phrase right there, they did not know the Lord. What was the office again? What was the office? What did these guys do? They were the priests. And the priests didn't know the Lord. Does that not strike you as odd? Does that not strike you as, wait, these guys missed the whole point of what they were supposed to be doing? They didn't know the Lord. And yet, of anybody in Israel, they didn't have little Bibles like we do. They didn't have the online internet. They could just go look up any verse they wanted. The priests were the only ones who had the copies of that stuff. And yet they didn't know the Lord. So I think the priest would be one of the celebrities. Another celebrity in the Old Testament, anybody want to guess? Who was the man? King, the king. Thank you. Yeah, you guys, shout out, come on. The king. Listen to this verse. This is what God's charge to the king was. It says, "And when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he shall write for himself a copy of this law, approved by the Levitical priests. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it in all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God by keeping all the words of this law and these statutes and doing them, that his heart may not be lifted up above his brothers." Let that sink in. The king of Israel. The first thing he is supposed to do when he becomes king of Israel is to take some time to make a copy of the law himself. And then he's supposed to read that law every day so that he'll know what to do, what God wants him to do, be able to follow that. But look at that next reason, that his heart may not be lifted up above his brothers. The ideal quality of Israel's king was humility. He was not supposed to think of himself as higher than his brothers, but just one of the brothers. So the humility, those two celebrity spots, the priest and the king, were supposed to know God, and they were supposed to know his word so that they could stay humble and so they could be the kind of men that God wanted them to be. And then let me close with, if I could sum it up in the words of the prophet, the other office in the Old Testament, Jeremiah says, "Thus says the Lord, let not the wise man boast in his wisdom, let not the mighty man boast in his might, let not the rich man boast in his riches." I think I added something there, didn't I? "Let not the baseball player boast in his skills, but let him who boasts boast in this, that he understands and knows me, declares the Lord." I had to go through 4 years at Long Beach State University of getting some of the lousiest, just horrible hermeneutics. You guys know what hermeneutics is? Study the Bible. It's one of those classes you'll have to take as an undergrad here at Biola. Just terrible understanding of where meaning resides and how we're to understand texts that we read. And then I come to Biola, and I get 3 years at Talbot School of Theology where I'm just getting hammered with awesome professors, awesome teachers. You guys, literally, present company accepted, get world-class Christian speakers coming to your chapel services. Literally, the best Christian speakers in the world come to Biola University to speak to you guys. And it's part of your education here. But you guys have the opportunity, not just the opportunity, you're obligated to take 30 units of Bible. Do you understand what a blessing that is? If I could go back and do anything over, here's what I would change in my life. Well, I say this, there might be other things, but this is the thing that I look back with a lot of regret. Is I had the opportunity because of there's academic All-American. And so Long Beach State had not had a golfer that was an academic All-American in like 30 years. I was there 91 to 95, and the last one that they had was at some point in the 60s. And so I had the scoring average to be an academic All-American, and my GPA was literally like 200ths away from qualifying to be academic All-American. And the only reason I didn't qualify was because my freshman year in college, I had a 1.67 GPA. Let that sink into a second. And they let me teach adjunct here. And I had a 1.67 when I was a freshman in college, and that killed me for the rest of my career. I missed out on something as a senior because of a mistake I made as a freshman. Don't do that. You freshmen who stood up, from this day forward, you've got 30 units of Bible. Take advantage. Do as good as you can possibly do in those 30 units. Sophomores, I don't know what your freshman year was like, but dig into those 30 units of Bible. And when you graduate from Biola University, you guys will go out into this world and you'll have a credibility that, frankly, most Biola students don't have, because you guys were competitors, you were athletes. And you take that out with those 30 units of Bible, and you guys will be leaders in our culture. And you guys have an opportunity to be leaders in our culture that other people won't have. Take advantage of the opportunities that God gives you.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.